Figure. Go for it. And in retrospect, they're right. In retrospect, they're 100%
All right, good evening, everyone.
Yeah.
It is 6 o'clock on October 24th, 2023, and we're going to call to order the special called Budget Committee work session. So I'd like to go ahead and call that meeting to order and ask our city manager, Jeff Towery, to introduce the topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council, and members of the Budget Committee. We're here to report out to you and engage in some Q&A and conversations around the dollars and cents effort over the course of the last few months. Want to acknowledge the team members who are in the room, Jennifer Cuellar and Noelle Amaya, also Grace Juster from the library, Crystal Woolridge trying to be invisible behind me, and also acknowledge Daniel from the police department who's not here tonight, who was actively engaged, as well as a bunch of folks from Parks and Rec and the library and across the whole organization. So I want to thank them all for their work, and I know that a number of you were able to engage in some of our process as well, and I want to thank you for that. A couple of items go ahead, next slide, please, Claudia. Sort of set the stage for what we're hoping to accomplish tonight. Primarily, Noelle and I will be sharing some information about dollars and cents over the course of the last few months. All of us are here to answer questions. We're interested in taking your questions on the project and the data. We'll answer as many questions as we can tonight. It may be that we'll have to do some research and get back to you on follow-up questions. We'll sort of inform the discussion about the proposed levy for FY25 and beyond, and we'll talk about next steps for the Budget Committee regarding the guidance we'll be asking you for, not tonight, but at a future meeting. Next slide, please. Just a reminder, not so much for you, but for the public record, that we conducted a statistically valid poll back in late December, early January of 22 and 23, prior to the May 23 election. We learned that there was both strong support for the McMinnville Rural Fire District, as well as strong support for more information and community engagement around city services and the tax levy. This Budget Committee decided, based on conversation informed by that survey, that we would not levy the approximate $1.50 per thousand of assessed value for the current fiscal year, and that we would design a community engagement strategy which we deemed dollars and cents, prioritizing with you and investing in our community. Next slide, please. A little bit more background about the project. The staff report that's in your packet tonight has a lot of detail, a lot of information. That's one of the reasons that we'd like to have some discussion and Q&A tonight, but not necessarily press you for any decisions, because we think that the discussion around this item and the opportunity to sort of sit with the information for a while will allow you to make a fully informed policy decision at a later date. We also want to thank members of the community who engaged with us over the course of the last several months. This is the first time, in my knowledge, that the city of McMinnville has had this kind of a public engagement strategy in an attempt to better inform how we construct our budget. We think we were successful. We learned a lot. You'll hear some of the lessons learned later in the presentation as well. Next slide. So just as a reminder, we used the software called Balancing Act, and we used two aspects of Balancing Act. We used the prioritization tool. The details are a little bit hard to read. So for the record, out of the 687 responses we got, we asked participants to rank their top 5 of 10. Culture, Parks, and Recreation ranked highest, Public Safety next, Maintain and Repair third, Roads, Paths, and Sidewalks fourth, and Housing fifth. We had most participants ranked all 5 as asked. There were some folks who only ranked their first or 2 or 3 or 4. One of the things that Dr. Frankline at Portland State did is he carved out those partial responses to see what they looked like compared to everybody who ranked all 5. And the top 5 remained the same. The number 4 and number 5 switched in order. So these are the full responses, and we felt like that gave us a pretty good sense of where folks were in terms of their priorities. And then there's some more data in the packet about this and some of the other aspects of Balancing Act. In addition, we also used a budget simulation tool, which was a challenge to design, and I think a little bit of a challenge to use. We had relatively little full participation, so the numbers aren't significant in terms of the number of responses, but it was interesting to me to see how the numbers shook out. The green section of the pie graph is about 32% of the respondents who suggested no change, that we continue to under-levy. The gray section, about 17%, suggested an incremental 50-cent per year approach. The orange section, a little bit smaller than that, at 12%, was $1 per thousand, and then 39% of the respondents suggested full levy of $1.50. It was interesting to me that, much like the survey that we did in December, there was sort of a plurality of support for city services and the levy, but not a real clear path forward in terms of how to exercise that levy. It was also interesting to me that the folks who support some form or levy was a little bit higher, but about the same as the percentage who voted yes for the fire district. Again, it's a relatively small sample size, and so we don't want to overstate it, but we do want to report the data out. What we heard was a lot of support for Parks and Rec facility planning, both public safety and perceptions about our ability to keep our community safe, the recognition of the challenges to maintain and provide capital replacement funding, interest in additional pedestrian and bike accessibility, and housing affordability and availability. For me, this isn't necessarily surprising. And if you think about it, Parks and Rec is the single largest outward-facing service in terms of how folks actively engage with us. Say, lots of people passively engage with us by using the wastewater system, but that's a little bit different. Folks choose to engage in terms of Parks and Rec. Public safety, also not a surprise, is by far the largest portion of our general fund budget. It was interesting to me that maintenance and capital replacement came in as third. I think that is probably a result of how much we have been talking about those unmet needs over the last 3 or 4 budget years. That's an indication to me that we've been consistent in getting that message out, and that people in the community heard that message and they understand it. Pedestrian accessibility, we've also done a fair amount of work in terms of studying that. We've got a Safe Routes to Schools grant that we've been working on. We've been working with ODOT about better pedestrian safety around Highway 99, and we've talked a lot in our parks planning effort about being able to better connect our trails and park systems. And again, the city of McMinnville has been talking about housing affordability for 8 or 9 years now, actively in terms of having a standing committee. It's been a significant part of our legislative agenda over the last year and a half. And again, I think it is an indication that we have been committed to the work, and we've been communicating about the work, and that resonated with the folks who responded. This graph is a little bit dense. What I will tell you is that the blue and the dark blue and the yellow bars are an indication of kind of medium to high new investment. And the areas with about 30 to 40% of response rate supporting increasing the level of service roughly align with those top 5 categories. 4 of the top 5 show the majority of respondents supporting additional investment in those service areas. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Noel to talk about the outreach strategy and the results, and then we'll continue the conversation. Oh, should have set the expectation. We're expecting that that Noel and I will be talking with you for about 15 minutes or so, and that the balance of the time will be available for the committee to make observations and ask your questions. Go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, you can just go ahead into the next one. All right, so we used 4 methods for communicating about the Dollars and Cents project in our promotion of the Balancing Act tools. So the first there is face-to-face. That means events or other opportunities that we looked for to interact with the public. Mail, that's pretty self-explanatory. I'll get into that on the next slide. Our social media campaign ran from July 18th at the kickoff to mid-October. And then we held 2 focus groups during the month of September. Next slide. Face-to-face, we were at multiple well-attended community events, including several of the summer fun events, Mac Grizz Fest, National Night Out, and the McMinnville Farmers Market on several occasions. For those of you who were not able to make it to the Ideas Fair, I thought this was somewhat successful. We focused our messaging on educating the public about the budget process and provided space for both structured and unstructured conversation during that meeting. The event was well attended with about 60 to 70 folks who joined us, and I heard good feedback from all of those who attended. It was not something that they had expected, and they hadn't seen something quite like that before. In terms of mail, we were moderately successful reaching our folks via city newsletter, which goes out every Tuesday. There were also several direct invitations or communications that were sent via email to our city partners, informing them on when and how to interact or participate with the Dollars and Cents project. We know that our emails were reaching folks, since we could see that about half of our submissions to Balancing Act were accessed by desktop, suggesting that folks were either at work or going about their day-to-day activities, checking their emails when visiting the platform. We saw our click rate overall through our city email rise about 27% throughout the project period. Between mail and social media, we saw an increase of 98 new members who joined the iHeart Mac platform, which is the biggest jump that we've seen since we launched the platform about a year ago. Our social media campaign was quite successful. We had lots of shares, interactions, and folks accessing Balancing Act via their cell phones. Our highest engagement was the informational videos that we put out that highlighted each of the categories on the prioritization tool. And our community really enjoyed seeing the faces of folks they either recognized or they know. The insights for those videos match exactly what we saw in the results of the survey. The reel of the mayor introducing the project had over 3,000 views, 243 likes, 47 shares, which is the highest engagement that we've ever seen on a reel that the city has posted. So congratulations, Madam Mayor, you can officially add influencer to your resume. In terms of our focus groups, I hope you had a chance to review the entire report that was provided by Praxis regarding the results and the feedback that was collected through both of those focus groups. The high-level points that I'd like to state for tonight's purposes are that we held 2 made up of 12 to 14 members, and we had no trouble recruiting folks to participate. We had printed sign-up forms at the farmers market, and we also posted it on iHeart Mac. There was information on how to sign up for a focus group on the posters that we printed out and had around town. We compensated members for 2 hours of their time with a $50 gift card, and what we heard in those groups mirrored the larger general sentiment of conversations that we're hearing in the community overall. I think one of my biggest takeaways from that experience was the need to continually focus on messaging about education on city services and processes, and providing opportunities for folks to give input. That's really not a profound takeaway from that, but it's a good reminder that there is a need for transparency that's really important to our community members now more than ever in an environment where there's a lot of distrust or uncertainty revolving around government. Next slide. General takeaways, utilizing the channels that are working for us. I've gotten real busy over the past 2 years, and I think this is a nice reminder to return to the social media aspect of my role in some ways. We've got a lot of folks out there who spend a lot of time scrolling on social media channels, and who may even rely on social media as their only form or main source of news or information. which can be a little bit scary, but also we can look at it as an opportunity, right? We really have to make sure that we're using that tool to communicate with our audiences, especially if we know that that channel is a good way to reach people. We do get really good input, especially when we spend more time on that output. And so that's just really something to think about. Providing paper surveys or printed materials, we'd really hope that our presence at in-person events would be enhanced by the technology. We had brought iPads, we had them posted in certain city buildings around town, but what we found out was actually quite the opposite. Folks were turned off and generally uninterested in interacting with an iPad when they came to in-person events, especially when they can just talk to you for a few moments or ask you questions about the things that they're interested in, or if they could fill out a paper survey or an interest form. So that was an unexpected learning moment for me that was pretty consistent throughout the length of the project. It might even speak to a larger sort of technology fatigue that I think we've all experienced a little bit since COVID. I would love to have a continued focus on being there for in-person events as much as we can. While we only saw about 130 or so folks navigate to the survey from the QR codes that we handed out at in-person events, it's still important to ensure that we're remaining visible and focus on the relationships and opportunities when we have them. Some of my conversations with members of the public were sometimes awkward or off topic, or there were moments when I was the only point of contact. Someone felt like they had to share their frustrations about the city services or what's happening in the city. But then again, that's exactly the point of being visible at those events. I also had many lovely conversations with folks. People shared with me quite frequently that they were really happy to see that the city was out making an effort to be visible, be available for questions, and share information in such a way. Compensation works. We live in a time, I think, where resources, including time, is really priceless. But if we can throw something out there to sweeten the pot a little bit, there's no real reason why we shouldn't. If we're going to ask people as often as we do to take their time to participate, it really doesn't hurt to honor that time with some sort of compensation, even if it's small. And I think my last point up there on the screen I already kind of talked about, but there's a real need in our community, I think, for transparency, and it's our prerogative to be creative and do the best that we can to share the details, the timelines, and make opportunities for connection. We were able to pull staff from other departments to make this project what it was, and we heard repeatedly throughout our process that the city needs to do this much more than we do now. To provide that level of engagement in our community that our community desires will require more resources. And I would love to see us in general put more definition around what those resources are. Next slide.
Thank you, Noelle. So we typically aren't asking for firm direction from the Budget Committee at this time of year, although because there's a revenue question, it's sort of tough for us to hit an expense target if we don't know what the revenue target is. And so we'll be asking you to have some discussion tonight. We will be presenting within a couple of days a brief survey for you to fill out, both about the amount of tax levy that you would support in the coming and future years, as well as ask you to prioritize the services that we ask the community to prioritize. We're also going to check your availability for two regular council meeting dates in November, the 14th and the 28th. We will provide all of the raw data from your survey responses as part of the packet for that meeting, whichever date it happens. We'll also summarize that data for you in a staff report and try to give you an opportunity to have kind of a focused conversation about areas where there appear to be some agreement or some consensus amongst the Budget Committee. And ultimately, we will ask you to take an action to set your expected property tax levy for the FY24-25 budget, which will allow us to work through the process to put together a program of services for you in a similar time track and a much smaller version than you saw last year. One binder only, I promise. Right, Jennifer? We will again, encourage as much Q&A and as much discussion as you want to have tonight. We'll sort of reprise that a little bit when we get together with you in November as well. One of the things that I hope that this body and the community can take away from this exercise is that this is the first time we've tried this. We engaged actively with hundreds of people in the community, many of whom have not likely engaged in our community's budget process before. And I think that is a meaningful change in how we communicate with the community, how we listen to the community, and it will allow this body to make better informed decisions, and it will allow our budget preparation staff to make better informed recommendations by using the information that we have gathered over the last several months. And again, just want to thank you for your policy direction and support to bring us to this point, and look forward to any questions and conversations that you have. Before I open it up, let me turn to Jennifer just to see, Jennifer, are there any pieces that you want to add or particularly correct me on, which is, I know, always great fun for you?
No, I think everything's out there, and if you do have questions, and, you know, now's the time, and happy to hear your conversation about how you're feeling about these things.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you all very much for the presentation and all the work that's gone into this. I just do want to note for the record that just before the meeting started, we received Councillor Chenoweth's comments on this, and so Claudia's emailed that out to everybody on the committee as well, so you can review those. And then I think, as opposed to going around the table, I think we will just open this up for some conversation. If anybody has initial questions or comments that they'd like to launch with, and if we need to formalize after that, we will. So anybody have any initial comments as we're opening up? Please, Councillor Menke.
I just want to address what you said about this public outreach. Years ago, we did a thing called What Do You Think? And I remember we had sessions in 3 different school areas with all over the town. I think the largest turnout we got was 30 people in one evening. We did have a certain level of advertising, and we also did a public survey that was statistically significant. But to have over 500 responses, close to 600, and to get the information that you've received here, I think is outstanding. I think it really speaks well of the city. And I think we should continue public outreach like this. As people become more familiar with it, they'll probably be more comfortable working with the online tools and stuff that we provide. I think it's wonderful for us to have that feedback. So I just wanted to comment on that.
Excellent, thank you. I need to pull up my Zoom screen here as well. I know we have members on Zoom tonight. So as a reminder, we're looking tonight to give staff some guidance so that they can come back, so we can all come back together in November. We, last year, did something which was quite rarefied, which is that we produced 2 budgets to reflect 2 different scenarios, but that's not our normal method of working, and it's not actually a reasonable method of working. We can't bring back built-out budgets for every single budget scenario. So we do need to give some direction so that as staff gets into that work of building the next year's budget, they have a goal that they are aiming towards. And so that is the work that we're doing tonight. That's the conversation. So with the information you have before you, both the citizen engagement and our kind of others lessons learned and what you have in your packet, we're looking to start to dig in on some of that conversation around property tax levy levels. Commissioner Watney, do you want to lead us off? Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Mayor Remy. So the silliest question I can possibly think of is if we go with the 0.5, 0.5, 0.5 scenario, how would you distribute those funds? If we're doing only a 0.5 in the first year, would you focus on Parks and Rec or buildings, or would you just kind of spread it around?
I think that would evolve as we work through the budget requests with the executive team and the budget preparation staff. We still do have the city's strategic plan. We still have the core services analysis that we did a couple of years ago that I think we would update again. We had a number of ad packages that we incorporated in the current year's budget. We also had a number that were proposed that weren't incorporated, and so we would review all of that information. I think we would use the information that we got through dollars and cents as another filter through which to put that, and I can't tell you if you give us another $1.5 million exactly what it's going to be spent for right now. That's part of going through that iterative process. I will note, again, for the public record, that the full $1.50 levy amount is expected to generate about $5 million next year, just so you have that context in place.
I might just add to that, and then I'll go to you, Councilor Peralta. I might just add to that the process that our executive team goes through is kind of, it's a very cohesive process of looking at the overall city budget in addition to their individual budgets. And you see a lot of give and take happen within those budgets when people know that they have certain expenditures they want to bring online, and working reasonably and evaluating not just the cost of whatever it is that they want to bring on, whether it's staffing or an improvement or a repair, but also trying to balance that out with kind of the life cycle, the sustainability of it. And I think we've demonstrated, our executive team rather, has demonstrated really good give and take, especially over the last couple of years. I know that kind of out of budget cycle, our Parks Department took about $90,000 and redistributed it in the effort to get the fire district off the ground, which is, then kind of resulting right in where we are now. And so, but that kind of process happens throughout. It's not that each department head is working in their own realm and then saying, this is what I want. It's what I have seen as it's an exceptionally collaborative effort of trying to put forward the best mix of services, goods, repairs, et cetera, for the city. Councilor Peralta.
One thing that would be helpful for me, and I didn't.
Sir, can you use your mic? Thank you.
I could, yes, and then people would hear me. Thank you, Claudia. One thing that would be helpful to me, and I didn't really see it in the packet, is, we set a budget for 2023. We're now budgeting for 2024. And when I think about budgeting, I think of like a baseline budget, like the service level that we currently have, and what additional resources, if any, do we need to maintain that current service level? And then anything that we want to do beyond that would be additive. So I wouldn't want to just say, yeah, let's, on a 3-year schedule, increase these increments until we've increased them enough. Because to me, that's not tied to specific projects. And it's unclear to me how that would, improve the service level. What I'd rather see is, we'd like to improve the service level in parks, because we know that park maintenance is important to people based on this survey. And so we have a proposal to do that, and that will require this additional amount of revenue. And from my perspective, like a baseline budget, then with add-ons makes a lot of sense. Is that what you were envisioning, Jeff, or?
Yeah, that makes sense. In fact, I mean, that's kind of how we do it now, and we could probably benefit from being more clear. We typically start with a maintenance level budget, providing the same level of service, and we evaluate what the costs are to provide that level of service. And then any service expansions or additions, we typically process through what we call the ad packages. And so 2 years ago, we didn't process any ad packages, so it really was just a steady state budget. I think that's one of the terms that Jennifer coined for us. We essentially were able to fund existing levels of service with any additional revenue that we had. This last year, we did have some ad packages and incorporated those into the budget. We could be more clear about what the sort of the roll-up costs for base level services are going into future years' budgets. So we'll take that into consideration and see how we can do a better job of explaining that.
Thank you. Can I continue the question?
Yes.
Thanks. So the main reason why I'm curious about this is that for many years, as you know, the city had operated with a structural deficit. And we've spent a lot of time on this council and taken some criticism for it, but we spent a lot of time to basically eliminate that structural deficit through the actions of the council. So my hope is that we're now at a level where we're not operating at a structural deficit because we've offloaded fire and we've brought in additional revenue streams already. And so now what I'm hoping is anything we do is going to be additive. And I'm hoping that the work that we do actually truly did eliminate that, which is also important to our.
So I will say, I don't think the community is done with that conversation. And the reason I say that is while this $1.50 is a significant proportion of the general fund, it's still property tax revenues that grow more slowly than our expenses grow. And so while that $5 million as a whole amount makes a significant impact on our budget, it fundamentally doesn't change the growth of our revenue. And so we have to continue to look for growth for revenue that's more elastic, that grows more in comparison to how our costs grow.
Sure.
This allows us a lot of capacity, and it allows us to have a more extended conversation for the next, again, 2, 3, 4 years, whatever it is. I can tell you that if we rolled all of that money into carrying costs, you would see that pinch point come a lot sooner than if you were to use some of those monies for short-term or one-time investments and limit our commitment to carrying costs with those property tax dollars. So I don't think we're done with that conversation, but I do think that this creates real capacity and really helps us, certainly in the short and even the medium term, depending on how the resources are allocated.
I might add to that just because my interpretation is a little different, and I'm not pushing back on you. I'm just from my perspective, what we've done is try to get ourselves to a place where we are funding at the most basic level the services that we offer and the maintenance. And so I heard that a little differently because I heard you talk about we want specific things that we're adding on, when I don't see kind of the structural repair portion to be complete at this point. I think these dollars will make a significant impact.
May I respond?
Please.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that there are needs in terms of buildings and other things that we've heard about on the committee and over the years. What I was meaning is we had a structural deficit for our baseline budget for many years, and I'm hoping we've basically eliminated that, and knowing that in addition, we're going to have deferred maintenance and maybe additional staffing in some areas where we were below service level. I mean, I get that, but, so thank you.
Okay, thank you, Counselor. Counselor Geary.
Thank you very much. I think we talk a lot about the thing I heard most when we were having our own dialogue, and one thing I heard that in terms of what information can we ask from you at this point to help us get there is sort of knowing a little bit more about where the community would prioritize the money. If so, is more specifically, how would we put money into Parks and Rec? More specifically, how would we put money into public safety? And more specifically, maintenance and capital replacement fund. Those three to me seem to rise the most. And so I don't know if this is a point in which we're able to sketch out a little bit more of what investments in those would look like, even if it is sort of doing what you're saying and pulling from core services or available projects, because I think it's a really good point you guys just made about is the money is going to last differently if we hire a bunch of people versus if we buy a bunch of vehicles or if we pave a bunch of roads. The money will last in our coffers longer. And so, if it's a more appealing project, short-term and less carrying cost, I could weight that higher at the maintenance and capital replacement than perhaps adding people or bodies in public safety and Parks and Rec. So I think it helps that calculus a little bit to see that come up a little bit more at this level. Is that something that we could look at?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and that will be an approach that we use as we bring the budget forward for your consideration. So we'll try to address those kinds of issues in a real clear fashion.
Okay, and I'm also hamstrung by viewing things through project by project. I have a hard time looking at, great, we can clean the parks 5% faster. Okay, cool. Versus if we were to say, okay, for a 60-cent addition this year, we could fund within 2 years all of the Highway 99 active transportation plan and get people to bike safely around town. Like, I could take a bite out of that. I think being able to then also turn around and communicate those things to the community in that way is super helpful way to onboard how we're going to do this. So that's kind of my biggest question, or more advocacy for direction for staff to help make that decision at the next one.
Right, thank you. Additional comments? Counselor Menke.
I do want to ask, although I felt a lot of empathy for the top 5 priorities, there was nothing that said we're allocating money to the ending fund balance or something like that, or a reserve account. And I think, in a sense, at least, we need to address that too.
Right, I mean, there's a council-adopted policy, you put us on a 5-year track
Right, we
to
did.
rebuild our reserves. That's policy direction, we'll continue to make progress.
Okay, so that will have a priority regardless. Okay. I think, judging from comments that I've heard, I tend to favor the idea of a phase-in. I mean, as much as I'd like to do it all in 1 year, whoopee, but I think a phase-in would probably go over much better with the voters, personally. So I think it's very important that if we do it that way, that we're extremely clear about how we're going to allocate those funds.
Thank you. Counselor Gary?
Thanks. One other one I had, in interest of how and could we spend money on Parks and Rec, I feel confident that we could. I think it's interesting to me to consider how we could, especially as this effort talked about, and I so often live in the new facility, how do we make sure to maybe carve space out to fund that? How should we calculate the future of, I wish we weren't so far away, but if we're 2 or 3 years out from opening that facility, can we commit to that now and save it? And so it's sort of, okay, 50 cents, but we're not going to spend it for 3 years. It sort of builds in protection and a runway for the community to save in terms of that if it's under levied, or does it say, do we dedicate those funds now to Parks and Rec to onboard them into that facility? I know that if we were to be successful in building it and then start the construction and get the funds, our department would need to staff up to be able to run that facility day one, and so there already is a little of ahead of time we would need to invest in Parks and Rec. But what does a commitment look like now if it's for future facility? How and would we spend that money now?
Sure, so a couple of approaches, and these are what ifs, these aren't, this is not a proposal. You could levy the dollars. You could acknowledge that in, year 3, 4, or 5, or maybe some of each in year, and again, I'm making up numbers, that we will need to onboard staff to do certain things, or make investments in programming, or make investments in marketing for a new facility. And in the meantime, we also have other short-term or one-time implications for the budget. We could start to build a reserve for equipment replacement and for building repair, and we could essentially, put resources into those one-time costs, so into those reserve pots, and then as we get to the point where we need to transition resources to ongoing expenses, then we can start to moderate those investments into those one-time pots and start to shift, essentially one-time or short-term investment into longer-term investment with carrying costs. And we could come up with a variety of strategies about how to do that over multiple years. Does that help a little bit?
It does, yeah.
Commissioner Maxfield.
I have a few questions. One, I'm trying to recall, because I took the surveys, I'm trying to remember, did the first survey in Balancing Act include a question about if we are going to collect all at once or phase it in? Or was that only in the second survey that only had 42 responses?
Oh, go ahead. So the prioritization was simply which big buckets of services are most important to us. We didn't tie specific investments or dollar amounts to those areas of service. And so the prioritization tool was sort of absent a discussion about levy capacity or costs.
I hear the question as the pie chart that gives us the feedback on responses. Was that generated by 42 individuals or 600?
Yes, 42.
42.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. I also wondered, with the paper surveys, were those added into the results for Balancing Act?
They were.
Okay, great. And another question I had is, in the top 5, I saw that maintain and repair and then culture, parks and rec were in the top 5. And I can't recall how maintain and repair was defined. Do you think there's overlap in that priority? Because if it's maintain and repairs, could it be referring to the culture, parks and rec facilities?
It was a little bit blurred in some sense. There was a little bit that was combined into the culture, parks, and recreation in terms of maintenance, but also in maintenance and repair also covered, facility maintenance in general.
Thanks.
Commissioner Ernst.
Similar to what Commissioner Maxfield was asking, when I reviewed this, especially the qualitative results, the comments that people had, focused a lot on houselessness. And I think it's interesting that within those top 5, I could see somebody thinking that parks might have something to do with addressing houselessness as well as public safety, as housing. Because housing, I was surprised based on those comments that it was so low. So I don't think that really helps with the budget preparations, but it was just similar to what Meredith was saying. Like, if respondents were confused in some way about what those priorities really meant, and just because I didn't think that those comments matched up with what we saw as the top priority areas. So, and were there, obviously you can't keep track of every comment that somebody told you at an event, but from your sense of things, do you think that those comments were reflective of what people's biggest issues were or concerns?
Which comments? What do you mean?
The comments throughout the packet that talked about direct quotes that people had, or they seemed like direct quotes.
I think what we're experiencing in many ways is that there's something that's high on our community's mind, right? And so using that as a factor in how they interact with the survey, right? It's going to be embedded in some way, I think, in the way that they answer questions. I don't think that the way that we presented those topics, I feel like that was clear enough to say that no, houselessness is not included in the parks and recreation or parks and culture category. But I think because it's something that's weighing on everybody's minds, I think that's something that they're using as, or that they would use, that would affect maybe the way that they answer many of those questions.
Yeah, thanks. Because it seemed a lot of times that people were saying that they wanted to be able to use the parks more, for example, but then they would say they couldn't because, and so it seemed conflated in their minds too. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Commissioner Mason.
Thank you, Mayor. Jeff, are we committed through collective bargaining agreements or other obligations into the next budget year and the next budget year with agreed upon wage increases and so forth? And I ask the question in light of not only are we dealing with the inflation factors, but there already may be obligations that we're bound to.
We're getting ready, we've got one more year. So we've got one more year in the police union contract, and then our non-represented employees, we deal with wages in the course of
Right.
budget process.
Okay. Thank you.
Council President.
Thank you, Mayor. First, staff, thank you for taking the time and doing all the engagement. It's great to see the thoughts of the community, and I know all the effort you guys put in designing those surveys that we had. So looking at the data of this is, you know, the amount of engagement we got is, for myself, discouraging, just due to how that compares to the voters that we had. There was a little over 7,700 city voters that turned out for the fire district vote, and we hit about a little less than 9% of that in the first survey and less than 1% of that in the more involved tool that was more cumbersome to navigate. So given that and the conversation here tonight, I would definitely be in favor of a phased approach, which our scientific polling pointed to back when Praxis did it in 2022 ahead of the vote. And if we were going to deviate from that, I would actually be interested in doing some more scientific polling with Praxis, if that's the way that we can engage the citizen base. I mean, we spent about $29,000 on the fire district effort, and we spent more than that on this engagement. So I don't remember exactly what Praxis's bill was for their scientific polling, but I do think if we're going to deviate from that 50-50-50 sin approach that they discovered in their scientific polling that there was a strong appetite for, that we need to get some additional data, because I don't think that this snapshot really represents the voter base as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any of our commissioners that are online want to join the conversation? You can raise your hand. Chair Hart?
Am I unmuted? Yeah,
You are,
looks
sir.
like I am. You know, I appreciate the engagement and outreach that has been done over the last few months, and you know, that brings to my mind engagement and outreach in the budget process. We have, you know, this very formal budget committee process, which results in a document of, you know, many hundreds of pages long, and I would think that maybe at most 5 people not on the budget committee or on the city council actually look at that. And maybe of that, not all 5 actually make it through the entire thing. And it's a very cumbersome process. I know every once in a while I go on the News Register website and where you see people complaining about the budget, and I invite them to attend a budget committee and, you know, meeting, and of course they'll never come. Which brings up, you know, if somehow we could actually, you know, leading up to the formal budget committee hearings, have try to increase the engagement and outreach of the community as a whole in that process, it would be wonderful if we could do that, even though I'm, at this point, I'm a little bit, well, number one, I'm not sure how we can do that. And number two, I don't know how effective it would be, but I think it's still, you know, it's still worth a try. In terms of how we proceed with the $1.50, you know, I don't, at first I was of the mind, let's use it all up. Let's go for it. Then I kind of shifted to thinking that maybe, you know, incrementally 50 cents per year might be a good idea. And I, after listening to some of the comments tonight, I've come to the conclusion that really the way we should approach this, or that I would like to see it approached, is to have some good and solid information on how we could how the city can effectively spend money which will cause an improvement to occur in these 5 priority items. Because otherwise we're just putting, we're throwing money out there, 50 cents per year, $1.50 in the first year, without really any knowledge or way to communicate to the community how that will make a difference. And so I'd like to, again, maybe from a bottom-up standpoint, process where we say, okay, if we spend this much more in the police department to better deal with those people who are roaming the streets houseless, how this much money can help deal with the issues out in the parks or out on Marsh Lane. We can communicate effectively to the community on how that, on why we are increasing the overall levy and why we are using all or a portion of that $1.50. So that's the way I would like to approach it. And I think that's all I have for right now.
Thank you, Chair. Others? I have I have 2 people who have kind of weighed in on the larger looming question that we're looking for a little bit of a direction on from this body tonight, which is if the city staff is going to be going back and looking at bringing on the entirety of our levying authority, or if we're going to be looking at a more incremental approach. I've heard from 2 people on the committee that are kind of in favor of an incremental approach. I've heard from 3 on the committee that would prefer to have projects in front of them before deciding on the approach, or that's a kind of rough way of, I think, boiling down what I heard. And I'm kind of looking here in these last few minutes for a little bit more input from more members of the committee. Yes, Commissioner Mason, thank you.
Mayor, thank you. I am supportive of the incremental approach, but I think it falls under the heading for me of a kind of a not more than the increment, and look at indeed those issues that have been raised about, well, this just isn't about the revenue, it's got to be about what it's spent upon and how that will affect future budgets, et cetera. But I think it would give the staff some guidance, executive some guidance on the ceiling for year 1, because somewhere, I mean, I listened to the budget summary as we went through it for the last fiscal year, and I identified things that staff members presented for their budget proposals, the deficits that are already in existence, where I could spend it all on just making up deficits. I have to confess, I was a little bit surprised that there were so many, and you can see them when you go out to examine what people have testified about. You can see the shortcomings. And we want to have people who are working with competent equipment in safe buildings and not wasting money on energy that escapes when we use it. So I would suggest an incremental, not more than approach, sort of.
All right. Thank you. Any additional comments? Commissioner Cunningham.
In a way, I kind of struggle with this whole thing. I'm just going to use a little bit of a story here. Today, my wife texted me, and she's like, we need to talk about fixing the car. And, we've got the car in the shop, and it's going to be several $1,000s to fix the car. And, of course, I questioned, what could it possibly be that would cost several $1,000s? And realizing that the going labor rate now is $295 an hour. and realizing that that just seems astronomically high, because I clearly know that the person working on the car isn't getting 295, but that it goes into the entire operation of running that facility. That from facility cost to facility upgrades to the employees that support those, that take the orders, that get the parts, that get everything, that all of that goes into the total cost of $295 an hour. And I even did some math of like, okay, if one tech was working 40 hours a week, 52 weeks out a year, like how much is that? That's like $800,000. And then just realizing like, well, that's really not that much when you think of like an entire facility being ran. And so in a way, you know, I struggle with trying to figure out what to tell you, you know, of whether it's 50 cents or $1 or, you know, $1.50. And I, you know, had to do a little bit of quick math. It's a $1.6 million a year is kind of the lowest level, going up to, you know, the 5 million total. And obviously what you all don't want to do is give us 4 different binders this next year with all 4 different levels. So I understand and appreciate needing the direction of what binder you should really go for. But at the same time, also appreciating the fact that we need a little bit better of an idea of what 1.6 million gets us versus, you know, another 1.6 versus the total of 5. And so again, I'm kind of struggling with all of that, knowing that from my standpoint of someone who's paying to fix a car to someone who's buying tomatoes and flour, that it costs me a lot more to make a pizza. Like, it's the cost of everything have continued to rise. So it's hard to look back this last fiscal year and throw it up against what might be this next fiscal year. So, because obviously one of the things I heard from you, Jeff, sorry, Jeff, is like, this is just property tax dollars. This is not nearly enough to take care of everything that we really need to get done. So, as much as I can appreciate moving into an incremental or a not more than, I look forward to getting a bit more information from you all as to what that materially becomes.
All right, thank you. Well, unless there are any, okay, and just so both you gentlemen know, we have another public meeting that is noticed to start in 3 minutes. Commissioner Watney?
I'll make this very short and sweet. I used to want to go with the 1.5, but after listening to everybody, I would like to do a modified 0.5 year 1, 1 point year 2, giving you a full year to give us a very solid set of projects that we'll do with the 1%.
Thank you, Commissioner, or Councilor Peralta.
I just wanted to make the point, or just actually get clarification from Jennifer. So the current assessment, our share of it is $3.50, and the max is $5 roughly. And so we're looking at potentially raising property taxes. If we were to do the entire $1.50, that would be about a 20% increase in individual property taxes in the city. I just want to get a sense of what the cost is like per.
Well, I hadn't thought about it from that perspective. I'd have to do the fraction myself, but the thing is, people's property, the city of McMinnville is only one component of what the entire property tax bill increases. So even if we moved up to the $1.50, that wouldn't mean that people's, let's say it's 50%, that wouldn't mean that their property tax bill would go up by that amount, because we're only, we're about a third or less of what people are paying.
For the next meeting, could you get a little more granular data on that?
Councilor Peralta. So the total millage rate for a city taxpayer is $18.49 after the fire district passed. And so we're under levying that, so right now they're paying $16.99 per thousand total millage rate.
Thank you, that's
So
what I was
there's
looking
about a 9% increase if we brought the $1.50 on.
That's what I was looking for. Thank you, Counselor.
All right, thank you all so much for your participation. Generally, what I hear is that the overall need is recognized, especially demonstratively, through buildings that are in need of major repair, where we have decades of deferred maintenance and understaffing, and we are not yet at a point where our city services are up to base level across the board. And with that knowledge, this committee would still like some concrete examples of how individual departments would make specific expenditures that maybe are not set in stone, but are real examples of places that the committee could invest, or that those investments could be made, so that it's not, the focus isn't so much on the levy rate that's coming back on, but rather the services or the repairs, et cetera, that are coming with that levying authority. And despite all of that, I did hear generally that everybody's mostly interested in an incremental approach. I did not hear anybody say that they're interested in bringing on the full levying authority at the same time. So that's our general direction that we will give to staff. And unless there are any follow-up questions, I'm going to close the Budget Committee at 7:01 p.m. I apologize to everybody in the audience. We try to always start these meetings right on time and end on time. Because we have been here for a minute, we're going to take a 2-minute break just so committee members that are staying have a chance to get a glass of water, et cetera, and we will be right back to start our regularly scheduled council meeting at 7:03.
Pulling it out of the shop.
I did some there.
Tuning it up.
Okay, good evening. It is 7:04 PM, and I would like to call the October 24th, 2023 regular meeting of the McMinnville City Council to order, and ask that Claudia Cisneros, City Recorder, do a roll call, please.
Counselor Geary,
Good evening.
Counselor Minke,
Present.
Counselor Peralta,
Present.
Counselors Chenoweth and Payne are absent this evening. Council President Garvin.
Here.
And Mayor Drabkin.
Here, thank you. We get to start this evening with a number of proclamations, which is always a lovely way to start. We're going to start this evening with Extra Mile Day. Whereas McMinnville, Oregon is a community that acknowledges that a special vibrancy exists within the entire community. Oh, thank you so much. Excuse me, before I finish reading that proclamation, I would like to properly open our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I've asked Councilor Peralta to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That's the joke people like to make on Zoom when they can't unmute. They say, first time. Okay. Take two. Whereas McMinnville, Oregon is a community that acknowledges that a special vibrancy exists within the entire community when its individual citizens collectively go the extra mile in personal effort, volunteerism, and service. And whereas McMinnville, Oregon is a community that encourages its community members to maximize their personal contribution to the community by giving of themselves wholeheartedly and with total effort, commitment, and conviction to their individual ambitions, family, friends, and community. And whereas McMinnville, Oregon is a community that chooses to shine a light on and celebrate individuals and organizations within its community who go the extra mile in order to make a difference and lift up fellow members of their community. And whereas McMinnville, Oregon acknowledges the mission of Extra Mile America to create 550 extra mile cities in America and is proud to support Extra Mile Day on November 1st, 2023. Now, therefore, I, Remy Drabkin, Mayor of the City of McMinnville, Oregon, do hereby proclaim November 1st, 2023 as Extra Mile Day. And I urge each individual in the community to take time on this day to not only go the extra mile in their own life, but to also acknowledge all those who are inspirational in their efforts and commitment to making their organizations, families, community, country, and world a better place. In witness hereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the official seal of the City of McMinnville to be affixed this 24th day of October, 2023. And our next, thank you. I don't believe we have anybody here to accept this Extra Mile Day, but we have a lot of extra milers in the room tonight, so I think that applause is right for everyone here. Thank you. Next, we have a proclamation for World Polio Day, and I do understand that we have Mr. Zirk with Noon Rotary here who may wish to come up and accept this certificate. Whereas World Polio Day, October 24th, please join us, thank you, is a day when Rotarians and individuals around the globe focus on eradicating polio from the world. And whereas when Rotary initiated Polio Plus to eradicate polio in 1985, 1,000 cases a day were reported in 125 countries. In 2023, only 7 cases of polio have been reported in a very small mountainous region of Afghanistan and Pakistan. Global Polio Eradication Initiative, GPEI, and EndPolio.org. And whereas we recognize that respect for ourselves and others is key to developing healthy relationships at every age and in all circumstances, and whereas health leaders from the Center of Disease Control and Prevention and the World Health Organization indicate that 2023 has the real possibility of interrupting wild polio so the world can be certified polio-free in 2026. And whereas through polio eradication efforts, healthcare systems are improved in countries, other diseases, for example, Ebola, COVID, and malaria, are addressed as well. And whereas when we stop polio, we also prevent post-polio syndrome that affects 25 to 40% of polio survivors 15 to 40 years later. And whereas in raising awareness of polio, we stop a disease that is entirely preventable, so no child anywhere will be crippled for life. Now, therefore, I, Remy Drabkin, Mayor of the City of McMinnville, do hereby proclaim the week of October 24th, 2023 to be World Polio Week, to raise awareness that polio is entirely preventable and encourage all to join in this observance. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the official seal of the City of McMinnville to be affixed this 24th day of October 2023.
Take a moment to provide the mayor for an End Polio Now pin, which is worn by 1.2 million Rotarians in 170 countries. And the solution to polio was a drop on the tongue of every child. So you can imagine how many billion people have received that.
Okay. This next one is what you're all here for. We have a number of board members of McMinnville Industrial Promotions with us here. If you'd like to come up and join us for the proclamation, that would be lovely. You're not forced to. So whereas the volunteer board, known as McMinnville Industrial Promotions, continues to make contributions in building economic vitality in our state and local economy since their founding in 1953, when 45 business and professional leaders pledged their own money to attract new businesses to the community. This volunteer board were not only concerned with business success, but the long-term health and vitality of the community. And whereas MIP, whose endeavors to support and bring business and industry to McMinnville are demonstrated by becoming the first industrial development company in the Pacific Northwest to qualify for the Small Business Administration funds and recognized by Governor Tom McCall when 9 different industrial projects broke ground in McMinnville in 1969, the result of MIP's 9 for 69 effort, with current success stories continuing to operate, such as Cascade Steel, Radius Recycling Company, Skyline Champion. MIP also formed a unique partnership with the city to acquire a $770,000 federal economic development grant to establish the city's major industrial park infrastructure in 1983, known as the McMinnville Industrial District, and in 2004 brought business leaders together to create, in 2006, the McMinnville Economic Development Partnership. And whereas these companies and more, who MIP supports through land development, build-to-suit facilities, business support expertise and jobs, add to the vitality and prosperity of our community. Such business operations MIP supports include Parker Meggitt, Castile Bottling, Betty Lou's, Amerson Precision Sheet Metal, William Henry, Fastenal, and Waterright, as well as attracting companies to locate to McMinnville, such as Excel Tech. Our community has benefited from their foresight and efforts to build a robust and vital business community in McMinnville. And whereas the volunteer-based organization of visionary leaders, including Founding members Phil Bladine, Chuck Colvin, A.T. Beal, Rudy Whittisher, Gail Vinton, Glenn Macy, Jean Marsh, Forrest Garrigus, Hal Heller, Harper Jameson, Willard Cushing, and R.R. Maines, and current members Doug Hurl, President, Teresa Smith, Vice President, Commercial Loans, Carol Granger, Harold Washington, Tom Tankersley, Devin Paolo, Mike Bissett, Chris Hewalt, Miriam Vargas Corona, Kate Gowell, and recently retired Skip Hewalt, Ken Patton, continue their stewardship devoted to McMinnville's prosperity, now in their 70th year. MIP has never wavered from their mission. Now, therefore, I, Remy Drabkin, by the virtue of the authority vested in me as the mayor of the city of McMinnville, do hereby proclaim October 24th, 2023 as McMinnville Industrial Promotions Day in recognition of 70 years of supporting business and industry growth in McMinnville, in witness whereof I have hereunto set my hand and caused the official seal of the city of McMinnville to be affixed this 24th day of October, 2023. Say a few words?
Devin, I think you wanted to give a speech?
Skip this.
Thank you very much for this. We all take our jobs very seriously and try to do the best for McMinnville to make it a better place to live.
I got I've seen that.
Thank you for coming and joining us tonight. We'll now go to comments from community members. Any interested audience members are invited to provide comments, and any comment provided that requires some type of follow-up will be assigned to a staff member. Anyone may speak on any topic other than a matter in litigation, a quasi-judicial land use matter, or a matter scheduled for public hearing today or at some future date. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person for a total of 30 minutes. If you are on Zoom and you wish to speak, please use the raise your hand function. And when your turn is up, we will announce your name and unmute your mic. Claudia, has anyone signed up for public comment this evening?
Yes, we'll start with, I wanted to state for the record, council received 2 email letters from Natalie McPhillips and Dave and Kathy Hageberg. Those will be entered into the record and made available on the amended packet tomorrow. We'll start with Amanda Westfall.
Welcome, Ms. Westfall. You'll see there's a timer up on the screen so you can monitor your own time, and if you'll please state your name and the city where you live for the record.
My name is Amanda Westfall, and I live in McMinnville. I moved here in the winter of 2015, and at the time we only had 1 car. And I got my son into Linfield preschool, and my other son was only 18 months old. And so what I did was I got myself a bike trailer, and I rode my sons to preschool every 3 days a week from Memorial quickly realized that, first of all, McMinnville is an amazing bike town. It really is, because of our climate and really because there's hardly any hills in the city proper. There's only the one dip that I had to do going to Linfield that's like the bridge, but that was it. My point in saying all of this is that McMinnville is prime and like ripe for being an amazing biking community. We just really need bike lanes, and I know that's in the future plans, which I'm super excited about. I just want to echo everything and also just put in the 2 cents that I feel the bike lanes should be, because I can say this, I'm a citizen here, yay. I feel that the bike lanes should be a different color. We should paint them because studies have shown, they did a 12-year study in Amsterdam when they made separate bike lanes like that with actual painted bike lanes. 12-year study showed that not only did it keep bikers way safer because of the cars being able to see the lanes and all this stuff, but it actually encouraged, it was like a 20% increase over 12 years of bike usage just because the lanes were different. Oh. So I just want to put that out there and also just really highly encourage the whatever commission, I don't know, city planning, whoever gets to decide on bike lanes, but more and more bike lanes around schools. My son rides to school every single day. He doesn't even let me drive him, like literally, even in pouring rain. He would rather ride his bike. It's just, freedom for him, 12-year-old boy. And there's, same house from the Memorial Elementary to Dunaway. I don't think there's any bike lanes. Like, there's none. He's just either riding in the street or on the sidewalk. So just like, better bike lanes all around the schools and maps that can be drawn like for people knowing they can go from point A to point B, all on bike lanes and avoiding large streets and stuff. That would be amazing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have anyone else signed up?
It's everyone that signed up.
Would anyone in the audience like to provide testimony tonight? Would anyone on Zoom like to provide testimony tonight? Do we have anyone on the phone?
No one's on the phone.
Thank you very much. We will now go to advice and information from counselors. And if you don't mind, Counselor Peralta, we'll start with you this evening.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me? Claudia's not here to...
I think you're about there.
The legislative breakfast went well. With Council of Governments, the legislative breakfast went well. Thanks for the members who attended that. We also had the quarterly meeting for the COG. The main update from that is that the Council of Governments is going to be expanding services, economic development services outside of the region to comply with the legislative funding they received. Also, I'm on the MCM TV committee. I met with the acting executive director, Kyle Dotterman. Their main update is that they're providing more services to the city in terms of recent events they're covering, but experiencing declining revenues due to just declining user base. So they're hoping that in the next budget cycle, we can revisit the allocation split. So Jennifer, maybe we can schedule some time to meet with Kyle between now and the not too distant future. That's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Geary.
Thank you. DEIAC meeting was scheduled but canceled, but we did, in the off time, staff got an RFP launched for the selection to find a consultant to assist in doing the citywide organizational assessment, so that was a big deal. Affordable housing, which I'll be joining for the first time, meets tomorrow morning, and on the agenda is density bonuses and small lot allowances, as well as community land trust pilot project, so should be a good one. MIRAC, nothing to report, and Stormwater Utility Advisory Committee had its first meeting, and it was a lot of table setting to get people up to speed, a lot of what's been covered at this area before, sort of laying the needs about next largest city to not have the mercury MS4 permit to be acquired and sort of laid out some through photos and videos and needs of what our current stormwater system and conveyance method is now and its failing state, and kind of, like I said, setting the need for those groups to work their way through and make recommendations ultimately back to this group. So we'll keep you posted on that. Otherwise, that's all I have.
Thank you very much. Councillor Menke?
Briefly, I did not attend the Parkway meeting I was hoping Chris would be here tonight to talk about it, but I do know that there will be a legislative session where the bypass will be presented, I think the first week in November, and so that's important. I believe that they've been working very hard to have a fairly substantial gathering for that particular meeting. In regard to YCAP, our executive director got married on the 15th. Prior to her leaving, the CEO or CFO quit her job, and so they are currently up in the air on having a CFO for a few months. And they're also in the midst of an audit and several other things going on. So it's a pretty heavy-duty time at YCAP. But I believe she's back in office this week.
Thank you very much. Actually, Councillor Chenoweth did send his notes, and so I'll read those into the record before I hand it over to you, Council President. So for his council reports, MEVLC met with Matt Edlin from Edlin and Company, and sounds like looking at different efforts for workforce housing. Sounds like some crossover with MAHC and other things that have been on that work agenda as well, including land trust, private-public partnerships. And this is the launch of a series that MEVLC will be doing. And then Jody Christensen, who's here this evening, also presented a list for approval for business resiliency grants that we'll be hearing about later. And he reports the list was approved, and the report's in our packet. And then Parkway discussed Section 2A, the interchange at Winooski Road. He says negotiations are still ongoing for the employee labor agreement. And that there is some time pressure. Some of the funds have timing deadlines for allocations, and they're being approached quickly. He reports all funding is secured, right-of-way is purchased, and once negotiations are complete, the project can go to bid. And Council President.
Thank you, Mayor. YCOM hasn't met. Airport Commission, we have our last meeting of the year, November 7th, which is a Tuesday at 3 p.m. That's a hybrid meeting, so you can join via Zoom or attend here at Kent Taylor Civic Hall. Fire district stuff, we continue to move forward and are still in the process of our fire chief hiring. And visit McMinnville, nothing to report. And thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Sorry to interrupt. I had one addendum that I think will be relevant to Kelly and to the Parkway Committee, which is that for several years, the two main transportation projects in our region, or at least that we have an interest in, is Newburgh-Dundee and Aurora-Donald interchange. And the Aurora-Donald interchange just got pulled into Metro's area, so that's no longer part of our region. And I think that will probably elevate the Newburgh-Dundee project.
Yeah, it'll free up dollars, because I know the ACTs were looking at that as a project. If they pulled it into Metro, that will really help us.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, thank you.
Was that the outcome of I saw there was an advertised ODOT meeting about the Aurora-Donald interchange last week. Was that the outcome of that?
No, that was the result of the census changes related to the U.S. Census.
Okay.
And so they have to do contiguous 50,000 person blocks, and so that got pulled into their region because of that, along with Woodburn, I believe.
Thank you. Between harvest and being out with COVID, I have a short list. This last week, I was able to meet again with Children's Institute and actually attend their 20-year anniversary lunch, which was wonderful. We've been working on forging that relationship. Children's Institute invests in early childhood learning, and this past year they received $50 million from the legislature to invest in early childhood facilities. They mostly focus on 0 to 5, and so we're continuing our relationship with them, and look forward to seeing what that produces. So met with Willamette Valley Medical Center to learn about their new Step 1 withdrawal program, which focuses on withdrawal from both alcohol and some opioids. It's a newer program in McMinnville, but it is functioning at all 9 of their regional hospitals. And they've had ongoing participation. I think about 20 people have participated in the program so far. And they've reported great success rates, and they're hoping to share more information about this program with the community generally. So we talked about how we could do that. We continue to work with Representative Elmer's office on housing bill for the upcoming legislative session, and I may have reported this last time, but in those efforts, Council President and I joined Rep. Elmer and Speaker of the House Rayfield for part of a tour that she did around her district, and we're happy to join them for the McMinnville portion of that tour and talk about some of the nuances that we face here. We also had a McMinnville Water and Light Commission meeting last week, and really what I want to let the council know is that the visits from both our city manager to Water and Light and then from the general manager of Water and Light to the city council will be starting over the next couple of months. And so I'm excited to see those and that added work between the two organizations. I wanted to thank everybody that came out for Sweep the Streets, and thank you to Visit McMinnville for organizing that. We also were able to touch on to service days with the school district, and I wanted to especially thank Noelle. I think she's gone now, but I wanted to especially thank Noelle. I did have COVID and was supposed to go talk to schools, and so she helped me put together a video over the phone that got sent off to introduce service days, so I appreciate that last minute and extra work on her plate. And I wanted to just make sure that everybody knows that we have a whole bunch of committee openings right now and more coming. So if you are not currently working on a committee in the city of McMinnville and you would like to be, boy, do we have space for you. We have so many upcoming committee assignments, and they're all advertised on our website and through our newsletter, but I do hope we again get robust applications for those committees. And then I'll just end by saying that while I know this is your last meeting with us, but you're still with us. You're not really done yet, so it's not time to send you off yet. But knowing that this may be the last time you intentionally come and sit in this room during this meeting at this table, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to you for all of the time and support that you have given and just being a steadfast resource for the city as a whole and all of your expert guidance through many, many years. We sincerely thank you and look forward to working with you over the next 6 months as we transition to I know you're very excited about not interim city attorney, but a heartfelt gratitude for all of your work. Thank you. Would you like to say anything?
Well, Mayor, I was going to save this for my report, but two of the three things on my report I will say now. The first one is that because it's likely my last council meeting as interim city attorney, I wanted to take the opportunity to express my gratitude to this council for the confidence and the wonderful treatment I've received as an interim city attorney over the last couple of years. It's been very rewarding for me, and I appreciate that opportunity. I also wanted to take a moment to express my appreciation to the very talented professional staff of this city, who have been very patient with me, who have been very understanding with some of my old school attitudes and thoughts. They've been very prompt. They've been very competent. I know the council appreciates the quality of the staff of this city. I don't know that the community fully appreciates the really high level of talent and professionalism and caring of the public servants who serve this city, and I want to thank all of those staff for working with me and allowing me to work with them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And we will go to department head reports, starting with our city manager, Jeff Towery.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. A couple of items. One of my responsibilities as the immediate past president of the International City County Management Association will be to serve as an ex officio member of the board of Mission Square, which is one of the 2 deferred compensation companies that the city offers to its employees. I will be going to the first board meeting of the year next week, and I'll send you an email with the details. I'll be out of the office Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of next week. I want to confirm that all of the closing activities were completed for the acquisition of the RB rubber site. We expect to release a public statement tomorrow sometime during the business day, and we'll share that document with you as well. And then, as noted, next Monday will be David Leitenberg, city attorney's first day in the office, and we will welcome David to the team, and means I'm sitting next to the happiest person in the room.
Thank you. Interim city attorney, Walt Gowell.
Just one more item, Mayor. As you know from Jeff's comments, and I'm sure you may also have been aware, the city took title to the RB rubber property on Monday, legal title by recordation of the deed, and is now the fee title owner of this property. Possession of the property is deferred until Northwest Rubber USA removes their personal property, as the council, I believe, is aware, until not later than January 1st. In discussions with them, they have indicated they may complete that process by the middle of November. I've been driving by on my way to and from work, and have noted that there have been trucks there almost every day. There was a truck there this morning that was fully loaded and ready to go by 9 o'clock. So they appear to be actively in that process, and the yard is getting, the amount of stuff staged out in the yard is getting, is reducing. One of the things that I wanted the council to be aware of, because of the concern about the personal property perhaps being abandoned, is that Northwest Rubber paid a personal property tax on that personal property that they're removing last week of $77,000. So that likely would not have happened had they had an intent not to remove it. Finally, I just wanted to confirm for the council that we have received a certificate of liability insurance from Northwest Rubber relating to the license that they have, the temporary license they have to retain possession of the property, and that the city has been named as an additional insured on an endorsement to that policy. That completes my report on that, unless you have any questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chief Scales.
A couple items real quickly. Most recently, this past week, we received information that we were awarded an Oregon Emergency Management Grant through Department of basically Homeland Security for Oregon. It was a surveillance trailer. You may have seen 2 surveillance trailers at the air show with the masts. They've got Wi-Fi capability. We can stream live video. So we were awarded $90,000 through a competitive grant. So thank you to Patchouli Bunnell through the Parks Department. She helped write that grant. And thank you to Emergency Manager Brian Young over at the Sheriff's Office that assisted us in getting all our paperwork in, so that was a plus. I mentioned the Oregon National Air Show. I was not at the last council meeting. It was a rousing success, no issues whatsoever. I will note that the air show has become increasingly more efficient and easy to work with, so they have been a very, very, very good partner these last couple years specifically. For hiring updates, we've got 4 people in backgrounds right now, and I'd like to congratulate Jeff Huey, our most recent graduate from the State Police Academy. I think we're 7 for 7 now on the most recent graduates who have walked away with some sort of Academy Award. He was awarded the Outstanding Defensive Tactics student, so we're very proud to get him back into the fold and get him started training. So that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you. Finance Director Jennifer Cuellar-Smith.
Nothing to report, thanks.
All right, I'm going to go to Zoom first, and then I'll go back to the table here. HR Director Vicki Hedges.
Nothing to report this evening. Thank you, Mayor.
Public Works Director Ann Pagano.
Good evening. Sorry, there's my camera. I just wanted to piggyback on what Chief Scales mentioned about the grant. We also got a grant for updating our emergency operations plan, also from the Oregon Department of Emergency Management. And we plan to move forward with that as soon as we hire our emergency manager, which we are getting very close on. So hopefully we'll have an announcement on that soon. And also I wanted to thank Walt, Mr. Gowell. It's been great working with you. We really appreciate all your help over the last year or so. So thank you.
Thank you. And Claudia Cisneros, City Recorder.
Nothing for the council.
Community Development Director Heather Richards.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and councilors. We have many committees that have vacancies coming up at the end of the year, so I do want to encourage people to apply for those. It's an opportunity to really make meaningful impact in the community. What I don't think a lot of people know is that a lot of the information and the construction of recommendations that come to City Council for action come out of those committees, so it is an opportunity to get in on the ground floor and make that impact. We also are close to advertising 2 planning positions, knock on wood, in our department, one for an associate housing planner and one for a senior planner. We've been operating with those vacancies and would like to get them filled. Our team will be going to the state planning conference starting tomorrow, so we'll be out Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday for that. We also have some planning commissioners going down to that as well, so it's good to see that interest in that type of training. Lastly, I wanted to thank Walt as well for all your work and support, and also remind you you're still on MIRAC, so we'll continue to see you.
Thank you. Special Projects Manager Jody Christensen, anything to report? Okay, Jason Carballa from Muni Court, do you have anything to report tonight, sir? No, okay, wonderful. Thank you all for being here. Just here for fun? I'm joking, I know why you're here. For our consent agenda, we only have 1 item tonight, so unless anybody would like to have it removed for discussion, I would go ahead and entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
I have a motion from Councilor Geary, a second from Councilor Peralta. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed say nay. And the consent agenda has passed unanimously. We'll now consider resolution number 2023-56, a resolution authorizing the mayor to sign grant award letters for the Business Assistance Grant Program recipients for a total amount not to exceed $115,000 for the program. And I'd like to call on Jody Christensen, Community Development Special Projects Manager, to present.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council, for the opportunity to share an update about this program. For comfort of viewing, is it okay if I talk from here instead of moving? Okay, all right, here we go. As you know, in the background that I've shared in the staff report, the city received $750,000 from Representative Noble through ARPA funding during the 21 legislative session. And that money was then developed through the EVLC, the Economic Vitality Leadership Council, in a programmatic way. How could we use that money to have the highest impact for community members and businesses that were still dealing with the ongoing impact of COVID, with a particular emphasis on underserved and underrepresented businesses? So the program that I'm sharing with you tonight is the grant program, one of the 4 programs that we have. This program was a startup for the city. This was brand new for us to take this on. And in the staff report, I talk about the program pieces. So it was launched, it was open for 2 months. We had the EVLC had given us some direction, thinking that we would have a low response rate to a grant. They felt that that wasn't really a high demand, but they thought it was important that we at least had a grant. Through the process, we brought on a community engagement specialist, someone who could help the city understand how to reach business members that had not been participating in any of the programs to date. And that was a transformative decision. What we learned through that process is that we had unintentional bias built into the system of receiving and paperwork, program outreach, those kinds of things that we just didn't have the ability to understand until we brought an expert in to help us really break that down. He helped us understand the cultural responsibility that we had in going out and reaching new members, being linguistically appropriate in that outreach, really understanding that there needed to be a built trust about building relationships with businesses so that they could trust government was, quote unquote, there to help, that we had a program that was going to be helpful for their business. So we really had a lot of work to do. We still have work to do, but I think the results of this program are foundational to the kinds of things that we should embed programs moving forward. We'll have more to share with you as this entire program closes out in June of 2024. We'll bring back a lot of information and data that we've been collecting. We've got a lot of great consultants who are helping deliver these dollars and making sure that we reach our underrepresented and underserved businesses. The great news is that when EVLC said, we think you'll get about 8 applicants, we got 26. So we saw the results of going out and meeting community where they were and breaking down the barriers, making it easier for people to access this resource. So through the 26 that we received, 25 met the criteria to move forward. And because we had an overwhelming amount, we went with the first round, those businesses that never received any COVID response funding, 0. We had 12 of those applicants, so they went through the process. And of the 12, the review committee is recommending, and we went to the EVLC, that 10 are moving forward for your consideration through this process to award them the money. One of the things I wanted to share with you is that we added in this process not only a review of a paper application, but we actually had an interview of the applicants. And I think Devin was on our review committee. It was a profound experience to feel the gratefulness of being able to participate in this program. They were grateful that they had the opportunity to apply. They were grateful that someone helped them through the process. And many said that they had never engaged with the city government before. And that was really powerful information to be able to bring forward to you, that this program will transform some of these businesses' ability to engage with government, because we've laid the foundation for that trust. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Questions, comments? Councilor Peralta?
First of all, Jody, thank you so much. Really wonderful program and something that I'm glad we did. I was just curious, the note said that there was a $750,000 amount that we received from Rep Noble, of which this $115,000 is pulled from. Roughly speaking, how is the rest of the 750 broken down, and is all of that coming to the city, or was that going to other entities as well?
The 750 was delivered to the city, and we, through the EVLC, established 4 programs. This was one, the grant program. We now have a contract with MEDP to do workforce coordination, so they're doing a deep dive in understanding what businesses need to be able to address, again, the ongoing impacts of COVID around how to access workforce, what kinds of training is needed. They're doing it in a bilingual, culturally appropriate way as well. So they're going to be unpacking some of that work over the next several months. They're creating an action plan. We have engaged with Micro Enterprise Services of Oregon, which is a company out of Portland. They were contracted to put together a 40-60 loan program for us, for helping businesses up to $20,000. I should report that that program has had a slow start. They have not had a relationship or had done work in McMinnville, and it looks like some of that money may be coming back, and the EVLC is interested in putting that back into the grant program and reopening that. The final one was a business training mentorship program. It's a bilingual training program, kind of one-on-one and group activities for businesses to help them make significant decisions and pivots to address the continuing, ongoing impacts of COVID.
Thank you for that update.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? I would then, I just want to quickly add that I appreciate your prioritization of going to businesses that didn't receive any assistance previously. I know when we've been out doing walking tours with various folks and visiting businesses that I've at times been surprised by who didn't receive funds for one reason or another, including eligibility. I know we heard that when we were at grocery stores, who talked about a lack of eligibility for funds because conversely to being forced closed, they were not allowed to close. And so that stuck in my mind, and I appreciated your prioritization there. Without hearing any other comments, I would entertain a motion to approve resolution number 2023-56.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. I have a motion from Council President Garvin and a second from Councilor Peralta. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And those opposed say nay. The resolution has passed unanimously. We'll now consider resolution.
Mayor, if I could, I'd just
Yes.
like to add one comment on another project that I'm working on. This Thursday at 5 o'clock, we'll be having the first 3rd Street Improvement Project Community Forum right here at 5 o'clock, and our chair will be welcoming everyone, Cal, and I just want to make sure that people are aware. Thank
2
you.
days.
Thank you. We'll now consider resolution number 2023-61, a resolution adopting a budget amendment for fiscal year 2023-2024 in the general fund, and I'd like to call on Jennifer Cuellar-Smith, our finance director, to present.
Thank you. Good evening. So this budget amendment, what it does is lines up the money that you all already approved in a contract for the 3rd Street project. And so the original budget was $111,174 and some cents short of what the actual contract ended up coming in at. So, so this action will allow us to put the budget numbers where they should be to move forward on the contract that we've already approved. One thing that is unusual about this one, you'll note perhaps on the in the budget numbers, where this is being funded from is designated ending fund balance. And the reason for that is this is coming out of the 7.7 million ARPA dollars that came directly to the city. We estimated over $2 million
of that pot of money to remain unspent at the end of this fiscal year to carry forward for next. So what we're doing is, because this is coming out of that money, we will reduce the amount of money that we estimate will be available for future projects in fiscal year '25 and beyond. So that's why it's an unusual category that you don't typically see. So that's my report. If folks have any questions or comments?
Counselor Peralta?
Thanks. My only question, this is not an overrun. This was an allocation that we had already planned on that we need to just sort of true up. Is that what you're saying?
No, it wasn't in the original group of allocations that you all made. You may recall, I think the balance was on the order of around $800,000 that hadn't been allocated to a project. And then when this contract came in, this level over the budget, part of the discussion of that contract said that we propose ARPA dollars be used to make up the difference. So that was part of the decision a couple months ago when the contract was approved. So this is truing us up to that contract decision. And Counselor, if I can follow up on that, and I don't know if Ann's still on Zoom, one of the reasons this contract came in higher than originally anticipated is there's two items that when we put together the ARPA estimate for this project were not part of that. One was the environmental discoveries that we've had on 3rd Street and what we need to do to attend to those. And the second was a larger focus on infrastructure improvements.
Thank you, Jennifer and Heather. Can you remind me, because I don't think I'm seeing it in the packet, and maybe I'm just missing it, but what was the total amount of the original contract?
Well, the original budgeted amount was $600,000 coming out of ARPA and $185,000 coming from the urban renewal. Am I remembering correctly?
So is that approximately $785,000, and now it's closer to $900 total?
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to understand the numbers on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Not hearing any. I would entertain a motion to approve resolution number 2023-61.
So moved.
I have a motion from Counselor Menke.
Second.
A second from Counselor Geary. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed say nay. And the resolution has passed unanimously. And we'll now consider resolution number 2023-62, a resolution adopting no rate increase for the city service charge in calendar year 2024. And I'll again call on Jennifer Cuellar-Smith, our finance director, to present.
Okay, great. So you all may recall about a year ago, we established a city services charge with ordinance number 5123. And as part of that, there was an automatic increase based on a CPI calculation that comes out of the Bureau of Labor. And so since we're coming up on that year, I wanted to take a look back at how did our first 6 months go of city services charges relative what we forecast, because we weren't sure whether our numbers were going to line up or not. And then also looking forward, what the need was in terms of how we had budgeted and planned financially for the current year and beyond in that revenue source. And so it's looking like we will, well, I don't have the final numbers, but I don't think these are going to shift any through the audit process. Our net unrestricted resources are actually over $90,000 higher than what we thought was going to come in during the 6 months once we adjusted that. So that means that, well, actually, I guess that's the revenue part. The net, when you take out the expenses, it's 37. Oh, no, I'm misspeaking. That's for this year. So it's 90.
that we will have extra funding coming in from fiscal year '23 relative to fiscal year '24. Then when we look at how things are going, if the first 2 months of data are representative for the next 10, we'll come out $37,000 ahead of what we projected to come in for this fiscal year. So if the CPI is 3.9, so if no action were taken, that would go into effect for 2024. And I've listed on page 3 of the staff report in your packet, page 83, how that would change the city service charge numbers. But because we are ahead, so to speak, of what our financial projections were on this, even though financial prudence says you should keep up with yourself in terms of rate increases year over year, I don't think we would be taking any significant financial risk by choosing not to move forward with a rate increase for the calendar year 2024. So that, because it requires your action to not just do the automatic, I prepared a resolution for your consideration to have no increase. Now, you all could alternatively say, well, maybe don't do the whole 3.9 and we could, change it to do a 1% or, something like that if you're interested in alternatives. But that's what you have before you and the reason for the resolution.
Thank you. Is there any discussion at this time? Councilor Peralta?
Thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate that, the work. So my recollection when we passed the city services charge, and I may be not remembering this correctly, is that we had one rate for single-family residential, we had another rate for multifamily, like apartments, and then we had another rate for people who could demonstrate financial need.
Correct.
And so when I go to the website, our city website, I don't see how if I'm to demonstrate financial need to get the lower rate, how I do that. And
Right.
so my question is part of the reason we took in almost 20% more than we expected because we're overcharging members of the community that might be entitled to a lesser rate?
No, I don't think that's the reason, because we do not have a program established. The only way that folks at this stage got the low-income discount level was if they had participated in the previous 2 years in a utility-based low-income program. So one of the things that I didn't discuss in my comments, but that are in the staff report, is there are a couple of things programmatically that we still need to work on, and that's one of them, is looking at what are alternative ways that we could make it easy for folks to apply and get for low-income option. So that's on the table. It's a personnel capacity issue getting there. And then the second thing that's also on the table is the creating the systems to be able to effectively manage the delinquencies that we've been getting from Mac Water and Light when these come off their bills. So
I might add a finer point on that, which is that to underline what our finance director is saying, we didn't establish a new program in order to show you were a qualifier. If you were receiving LIWA or LIHEAP, or you had already proven your qualifications, then you are automatically enrolled.
Right. I got
Okay.
it. And so your question is, how do we enroll new people going forward into the program?
yeah, I think there are some ways that we can explore to make that easy. It's a matter of being able to program our time to dig into it relative other priorities.
Yeah, I mean, the one place that I can just see on its face is just on the page itself, to give people that option to check it. There's not that currently.
Right, because sensitive information would be needed, we can't just jump into it, so.
No, I get that, but you could check, click here if you're interested in this program or something like that, and then you have a checkbox, so at least people can indicate an interest.
Yeah, and as people have asked us questions, I'm keeping a list of folks, so, yeah.
Thank you.
Other comments? Counselor Geary?
Yeah, I think in keeping with sort of the line of our discussion around the taxing authority and cognizant of a lot of things that Adam talked about on the campaign trail for the fire district, I think it all serves that bottom line of building a healthier city for the next dozen years or next dozen decades or however long and lofty you want to get. And I think this recommendation being in line with that totally makes sense, and I appreciate it. So I intend to support it.
Thank you. I have some comments from Counselor Chenoweth to read into the record, and then I have my own comments as well. So before I double up those, anything additional from either of you?
As much as I hate to pass on assessing, because quite honestly, I don't, although I like your argument and I like the ability not to assess, it always concerns me a little bit when we don't. So, but I'm okay with it at this point.
Anything from you?
Just glad to see we're foregoing any sort of increase, and I think as we continue to build trust with our citizens around revenues, it's important to acknowledge that a rate increase isn't needed at this time, but also acknowledge, that we don't want to get so far behind down the road, depending on how we roll out our dollars and cents and other aspirations we have as a city. So I'm fine with it staying, in the city service fee methodology to move forward, and that it needs to come to council each year for us to address it. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Chenoweth asks the council to reconsider the need and continuation of the city service charge, and further asks council to direct staff to work a phase out of the fee commensurate with any spending of the $1.50 that the council has the authority to levy through property taxes. And we will also mail the further there's kind of a math story problem that underlines the point, and we will email that so everybody has all of those comments. I will just say that I think that, we were very specific about this. Typically, everything comes before us with all of the options. You mentioned the council has a number of options. There's always the, do nothing or do a portion of. And I know in our conversations about this at leadership, we felt that it was very important to have that really, the straightforward conversation with the community of we've brought these resources in that we need. They came in higher than expected, and we have the task in front of us of figuring out the budget with the monies that were brought in from the fire district. And so the good steward thing to do to the community was to bring this resolution forward with your recommendation to not increase. And I recognize what you're saying, that we have not solved our budget problems, and we definitely don't want to give the message that we have solved the budget problems. And that said, one bite of the elephant at a time. And so with that, I would entertain a motion to adopt resolution number 2023-62.
So moved.
I have a motion from Councilor Geary and a second from Councilor Menke. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And those opposed say nay. And the resolution passes unanimously. And next we have what I'd like to set up is a very high-level conversation. This has come before us, I've brought this topic before us a couple times now. The idea of this conversation is to both be tracking what's happening since we've started talking about the effects of ballot measure 110 on the city of McMinnville and all of the effects of that from police through the courts. As you may or may not know, there are multiple things underway currently at the state. And depending on what direction that goes, depending on what direction that goes, it'll have different implications for the city. So this conversation is kind of a primer of where we are, where we could go to set ourselves up for success, while also recognizing that there are still a lot of things that are unclear at the state, and I think also to talk about how some of these different things could kind of play out or have an effect to make sure that we're all considering systems changes that could come about that aren't specific, that are not just focused on what's happening at the street, but then what happens after the street interaction happens. And so with that poor intro, I will turn it over to our Chief of Police, Matt Scales, to present.
Well, thank you, Mayor and members of the council. I would ask you, I hope that you've had the time to take a look at my staff report that was included in your packet. As Mayor Drapkins noted, this is a little, this needs to be at a 30,000-foot view, not the granular type, in my opinion, because we don't know where this problem or the resolution is going to land. All I know is that I think the council would be a step ahead if there is the need to have some sort of a city ordinance that would prohibit or ban public drug consumption. And so my report really outlines some of the history of ballot measure 110, which passed obviously in November 2020. I think we'd all agree that the state and cities are now facing a drug epidemic of epic proportions. The PD, the fire district, responds daily to overdoses of people using illegal drugs throughout our community in specific locations up on Marsh Lane. I think you can see that weekly, if not daily, happening. And the city, I think, needs to recognize that we currently have some significant gaps in tools to combat fentanyl crisis or other drug crises, whether it's methamphetamine, cocaine, you name it. This specific issue with respect to public drug consumption at present is a result of NORS 43402, which prevents local governments from prohibiting the public consumption of controlled substances. Obviously, we have prohibitions through the statutes on limitations of public consumption of cannabis. We've historically had prohibition of alcohol in the public setting, et cetera. So the city is already in a position where whether it's controlled substances or now legal use of marijuana and obviously alcohol, they're already prohibited. Does the city want to take the next step in preparing itself to ensure that the citizens, both from a public health standpoint, from a drug standpoint, from getting people into treatment standpoint, from reducing issues within our community that we live, reducing call loads on the PD in your fire district, and really getting people the help that I think they truly deserve, whether or not they want to move forward with some sort of a resource or an ordinance that would prevent that. I would say, though, one of the most important things is that we learned from the passage of ballot measure 110 is that implementing something before the backbone is in place is a recipe for disaster. That's why ballot measure 110 has failed miserably. The resources programs budgeted, the dedicated manpower, those all need to be in the calculation as we move forward. Should the council want to move in that direction, there has to be resources in place, programs in place, systems in place before we roll this out. because I think at the end of the day, although we have the right intentions, it could be destined that we fall short because the public or citizens expect us, should we have an ordinance in play, to have programs in play that make this effective. Otherwise, it's a failure in the long run. So, I think lastly, before we get into sort of the nuts and bolts and whether or not you want to move forward, we need to continue to partner with our local agencies, whether it's the Yamhill County Sheriff's Office, whether it's the DA's office, whether it's our fire department, whether it's our partners at municipal court. We all need to be on the same sheet of music. We all just need to be in lockstep in how we move forward. And I believe that this may take a sizable investment, financially, manpower, personnel-wise, resources-wise, to adequately address the demand that the community is going to expect from the PD and from municipal court or other service providers that might provide programming. So, as I mentioned, there is a massive amount of groundswell support within the legislature to move some sort of repeal, or excuse me, I should say reform, in place so that the cities can take back their streets. So the cities can deal with this drug epidemic in a proportional manner that gets people, like I said, back into services and back to a healthy lifestyle. So with that being said, I'll be testifying, I'm going to be testifying on the 6th in front of a state committee about our experiences. Specifically, I think you all recall, we had a massive OD last spring, which sucked out the entire resources of the entire county law enforcement and and I'll be testifying at the state about what we're seeing on a day-to-day basis, whether it's in that specific call, whether we're dealing with stuff up on Marsh Lane, whether it's dealing with just chronic ODs that happen daily. So there's a lot of moving parts, and I don't want to say we're going to put the cart before the horse, but I think, as you stated previously, Mayor, that us being in a position where we can effectively address the situation in a timely manner, should that opportunity present itself, it's important that we at least get ahead of the game and say, yes, this is something we want to do. And with that, I will probably turn over to Jason or your questions, should you have them, of myself. But I think the staff report really sort of captures what we're looking for. No, it doesn't overturn ballot measure 110. It wouldn't. It would give us the tools in the community. I had conversations with DA Barry on Thursday at our LEA meeting, where he's of the opinion that there may be some statewide reform that will push the criminality of possession of small amounts back into the judicial system, and that he is prepared to take that on, but also that it'll probably be taken on with a lot more services, drug rehab opportunities before it turns into a criminal matter. So maybe I should use the term deferrals, but again, that's really at the base level right now. It's really, they haven't determined that. This next Thursday, as I mentioned, real briefly, I'm on a call with the state sheriffs and the state chiefs to discuss our recommendations moving forward to the state. And I know that the League of Oregon Cities also has been involved in those discussions. So I've really rambled a little bit, but I'd be more than happy to answer your questions. I'd like Jason to have the opportunity to discuss maybe some impacts on municipal court, because if we have a municipal ordinance and it's not taken on by the county or a state, we will be the ones providing that service.
Correct, and currently we only have alcohol-related offenses in our courts, right?
That's correct.
As a launching pad, will you take us deeper into the municipal court?
Sure. Good evening. I just want to echo the thoughts of Chief Scales. It's really something that we just really need a preparedness citywide if we're going to do something like this, and we're going to have an ordinance that involves the municipal court. Really what it is staffing levels, programming, things that would come down to the municipal court if that is the direction that's taken and it's not something that the county or the state court is going to take responsibility over. So right now there's a lot of variables, but this is really, like Chief Scales said, the 30,000-foot view of the program. And so the city right now only takes care of, the municipal court only takes care of alcohol-related offenses in the sense of DUIs. That's the only substance that we provide treatment for through the court system. And so drugs would be a totally different avenue. Any kind of ordinance that's passed would need really an implementation of a brand-new program and things, whether it's additional court time, whether it's more funding for whatever staff levels we'd have to increase. So, again, I'll echo Chief Scales in the sense that this is a matter of, without the backbone in place, without a lot of really thoughtful preparation, we really would have a problem implementing something.
Great. So before I go to questions, I'm just going to kind of reframe what I understand and share that, hopefully also that message kind of echoes. So we can look at, we can move towards the creation of this ordinance to set McMinnville up for success. However, there are, at the highest level, two major influencers. One is that it's unclear if reform is going to come directly through the legislature at this point, or if reform is going to come through the ballot box at this point. And there could be different implications from how that rolls out that affect the way that we are able to then carry out that law. And then at the next level of that, there's, depending on how that rolls out, it could have the effect where we need to be working very closely with the county to make sure as we arrest people that they can go into a prosecutorial system, that we're not just releasing them, or that we're not just arresting and releasing immediately, that there is space in jail, space in programming, that they're going to be prosecuting just generally. And then it also could affect the municipal court if the state, if things go through differently at the state, and that's not a role the county was going to take on, if it's something the city was going to take on independently, in which that would be the development of an entirely different program that we would also then need to be prepared for in terms of how are we going to deal with that additional capacity of cases coming in, making sure we have enough staff not to just process the cases, but to have people in the courtroom, that we're able to meet specific timelines, and that people are able to get processed relatively quickly and then into the next step. And what we don't know doesn't stop us from moving forward on what we do know. We've a very clearly identified problem, and so with kind of those things out there, as these are the considerations that we need to have in mind. What I hear is or what I hear you asking for is a very thoughtful rollout of this, so that we don't draft something that would be impossible to enforce, and therefore just have an ordinance in title only. And also gives us time to react to how things actually roll out at the state, so that our ordinance, if we were to go forward with one, really relates specifically to how we're allowed to enforce that law in the first place. Would you say that, gentlemen, is an accurate kind of overview? And our voice, I think the part I left out is that we are still using our voice very loudly to insist for reform at the state level, and that's demonstrative through your testimony that's upcoming and the other work that we're doing with other organizations.
You nailed it. I think you captured the sense of what we need. You almost want to say, let's kind of hang tight a little bit to see what comes from the short session, but then you don't want to get so far behind that you're not prepared. So to your point, I think really starting to have these conversations with municipal court about what would that look like, what would the impacts be to their budget, what would the impacts be to their court, what would the City Attorney Gal mentioned, defense funds for those that are in those that are going to need to be serviced by a defense attorney. Those are also things that need to be taken into consideration. But I also think just kind of waiting for something to happen and not being out sort of pacing what's taking place in Salem, we could find ourselves behind an 8 ball if they just do, okay, we're going to pull and provide you with the home rule that allows the cities to go forward and manage this issue locally. Then we're going to be kind of scrambling to get caught up. So I think it can work in concert with one another, just kind of tracking what we're doing at the state level as well.
All right. Thank you. Well, everybody knows where I sit with this, right? I've asked this to come before you, and this is the direction I'm pushing, so I'll save any other comments and go to the council. Whose hand went up? I didn't see. It was all, we'll start over here. Ladies first. Councilor Menke.
I just would like to know, what would this look like? We obviously don't have the funding to do it by ourselves, so what are we doing? What are you suggesting here at this point? That we just kind of say, yeah, we're interested in this, but we're just going to wait on the state and move it on down the road, or what?
Are you talking about funding for programs in the municipal court?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to start arresting people, we need to have some programs, and we need to have.
Well, that's right. That's why
You're going to need people too, probably.
And I don't want to speak for the municipal court, but I think it's important that we then go to, okay, circuit courts, drug courts, how did you operate previously? What was your funding like? What did that look like? What did the framework look like? And that is at least an initial step. I mean,
So just kind of do some initial budgeting, figuring out what this would look like. Is that what you're saying?
I think that's a crucial piece of it, to give you the council.
I mean, do you need more than, gee, we're interested in knowing what the budget would look like for something like this if we did it ourselves alone?
Am I interested?
Are you saying that would be sufficient, or do you want more than that?
I think they're looking generally for direction that the council wants to move in this direction of preparing to have an ordinance, but that ordinance could not go into effect until there was a change at the state level of some sort, because our city law can't supersede state law. And so kind of what we're looking for tonight is the general direction to staff of, does the council generally want to go in this direction? And that includes all of those things that you mentioned, evaluating not only what the ordinance itself would look like to be effective, but staffing levels, making sure that we have prepared court systems, making sure we have our good partnerships going so that we know that there's a real result to come out of the work.
So we're not going to vote for anything tonight, but we are interested in seeing how this would go forward, yes.
Yeah.
I think kind of my overall thought is this topic is a storm that's brewing. And if we're not prepared for that storm and batting down the hatches, we're going to really have a hard time dealing with that when it's here. So this is very much so the first step in a lot of steps. And so I would say that you did a great job summing up kind of what the court's feeling is on a lot of these issues, including looking at the major pitfalls that are going to come along with some of this stuff. And so that's exactly our point of view, is really just preparedness and really doing a better job than 110 is doing at the moment.
Thank you. So now we'll go from this way over. Councilor Peralta, we'll start with you, and then Councilor Geary, and then Council President.
Thank you. Chief, I'm glad to know that you're going to be testifying in front of that legislative committee. Do I remember that you're now the president of the Oregon Police Chiefs Association?
That's correct.
And that puts you in a pretty good position to be involved in the thick of the legislative conversations, I would think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we should give the chief all the tools that he needs in terms of council direction to start the process of seeing what this would look like for the city, and hopefully to use that as a template for your negotiations with the state, so that you can get, maybe use what we do here in McMinnville as a model for other places, given that you're going to be in the thick of those conversations. I don't think we can anticipate exactly what the legislature is going to do, but I do trust that you're going to be in the core of those conversations, and I think we're very fortunate as a city to have you there. Yes, I think we need to give the police the authority they need to prohibit public drug consumption and draft the ordinance so that it aligns with the county drug court, which I don't know what the status of that is under the new law, but also with the proposed or modified, I guess, city alcohol and drug court. Another thing I wanted to just mention, I sat in on last week's legislative meeting, the predecessor to the one you'll be in a couple of weeks. And the one thing that really caught my ear was that the Oregon Health Authority promulgated new rules that enable jurisdictions that have crisis prevention teams, like Cahoots, to get Medicaid reimbursement for those teams. And so I would really like to, as we're thinking of this next budget, get more information about what the county's doing with their crisis intervention model and how that fits in with what the city is trying to do. Because if we can get additional federal dollars to do that type of work, whether it's through the county or through the city, I really hope that we'll do that kind of hand in glove with trying to bring these other systems up. A couple of other comments. The one thing that I keep hearing in COG from the county commissioners is that they think Measure 110 requires county-based treatment centers, and the counties are pushing for regional treatment centers rather than county-based because they don't want to reduplicate, and I think we should put our support behind that proposal.
Regional treatment centers?
Yeah, regional treatment centers, because that's the place that we can get people to. Like, that's the one piece that seems to be really missing in addition to a crisis prevention team. So that's the other piece. Otherwise, I'm really excited that you're working on this, Chief and Mayor. Thank you for your leadership.
Absolutely. Before we go to Councilor Geary, I just want to say, I'm not offended that you don't read my city newsletter, but it is evident right now.
Damn.
So last week I sent out information about the Crisis Mobile Response Team at the county, which previously has been a team of 3 people for all of Yamhill County. And through the Crisis Now model, the county's working, it's bringing that up to a 12-person staffing. They're in the hiring process currently. And then we at the city are looking for ways that we can specifically support that programming so that we can have more of those resources in McMinnville, which having the majority of the population in McMinnville, as well as having all of the behavioral mental health and drug treatment centers in downtown McMinnville. It seems in line. Currently, our city administration has been working with Health and Human Services at the county to look at what a specific scope of service would be for bringing additional resources to McMinnville as the county brings on those additional resources countywide. I'll forward you the email, but just wanted to add that. Councilor Geary.
He doesn't read my newsletters either. Thank you, Chief and Jason, for bringing this forward. It's robust, and as well, Mayor, I'd like to echo Sal in your leadership of bringing this forward. I'm supportive. I think this is really prudent, and love to see the initiative bringing it forward. Only kind of question I can think of is a hazard at a timeline for runway. So I'm only thing, I think it's going to be a daunting amount, period. Whatever answer you come up with, it's all going to be a daunting amount. And similarly, I think it's going to be a good amount of work to get to that level. And I'm loath to add more to the pile, but so I guess my question is, what's a hazard as to a timeline of, it's going to be X amount before there's movement enough that it should start coming down. So we have 6 months to develop something and 3 months to chew it over before passing it and letting it park and then start working on it to fall out. Or is it 2 months to get our ducks in a row? Or is it 2 years to get our ducks in a row? And that would help me kind of feel good about that's the timeline for this project. If it's a bunch of work all in a hurry, it's still good work to do, but I'm a little more loath. But what's that timeline look like?
Do you want to take that, or I can start it and you can go? You want to go? I think that kind of depends how the reform comes through. When does the short session end? February? So
February,
spring,
March.
I think spring would be when we would know what the reform looks like, and then from there, that gives us the information we would need to get into more specifics, the rest of the timeline. And then I think that depends what that programming then looks like. And so I hate to not give an answer, and perhaps you can give a better answer, but if it's a McMinnville program versus a county program, you know, we're building a program from scratch then. So I think that is a different timeline than working with, and please, city manager.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. I think initially what we would do is we'd identify the key team members in our organization that would need to come together to really work through an issue like this. We'd focus our initial energy on tracking and engaging at the legislature to see what, if anything, they may do. And based on any legislative action that's in the queue for the short session and is taken action on, then we could probably plot a path forward and identify what some options are. I would guess we would come back to the council in a sort of a work session setting relatively soon after the legislative session to at least talk about what the statutory framework was, presuming that anything passes. If not, what we're really in the process of doing would be tracking the initiative that's already been filed and would be voted on in November, and potentially identifying some paths forward, again, through probably a series of correspondences and work sessions with the council over the next several months. So I don't think it's a drop everything and do it now. We certainly don't have enough information to draft code language or options for programs at this point, but just really identifying where we think there might be resource gaps and then just following the sort of the authority that the state or the voters may grant.
I would say that I promise to report back to manager and obviously the mayor and city council about progression. Some of this stuff is obviously negotiating type stuff, specifically the legislative stuff. That's going to be probably pre-packaged. Everybody's going to have to agree upon it for that short session. But to that end, I will guarantee you that I will keep you in the loops. And my hopes, candidly, is that it gets pushed back into the county that does have the resources, where they get to work the problem like they have for the last 20 years as drug courts have come through and been very successful. So I will promise you I will keep you informed.
Thank you.
Thank you for the answer. It makes me feel good and that we're putting that time into it and have that time to watch and think about it and let it develop. And then I would just add that, I think we're all dealing with the fallout of it, whether your community is big or small, urban or rural, or part of a big area or a small area. And so the more people we can bring to the table to help us and combat this would be what I'd like to see happen as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Council President?
Yeah, thank you, Chief and Jason, for coming tonight and presenting. First question would just be from our policing and court policies. You mentioned a little bit about community drug court at the county level, but what was our policy for public drug use consumption and arresting or citing prior to Measure 110 passing?
Prior to Measure 110 passing, you could arrest for the small quantities, and that would all go into circuit court, okay? Whether it was public consumption in a pipe or actually just possession, you would go to the circuit court, right? Circuit court, I'm not going to speak for exactly how DA Barry's programs were in place, but you certainly had bites of the apple a number of occasions before it would become a criminal matter. In fact, a number of those probably first-time offenses were dismissed historically. But eventually, if you are not completing your programming, that is when they referred it as a criminal matter for the most part. But we relied solely on the circuit court and the district attorney's office to handle those public consumption, small quantities as well. Did I answer your question, sir?
Yeah. So with that being said, and knowing, the short session basically runs February 5th through March 10th from what I found on the state website, pending they don't have a 5-day extension by a 2/3 vote. I would personally like to see Muni Court and the PD work with other partners and figuring out what the budget impacts would be if it came all the way back down to the city level, if it went to county, and also in that budget analysis for an ad package for next budget cycle, delineating out what we currently spend just by repeat offenses of going out and applying Narcan numerous times to the same individual, or what our load is on the system right now by doing nothing. And so I think when we initially see that number of this is what it would cost to enforce it at the city level, well, this is what it costs for doing nothing, and that's going to close that gap on that number. And so tracking, we're about to kick off budget, departments starting to go into budget season. You guys will be coming out of that about the legislative cycle, so I hate for you guys to just do busy work, but I think it's a relatively small ask compared to the dual budget that we prepared last year with the fire district, and I think it'll keep us on the forefront at the tip of the spear of this legislation that could be changing in this short session. And if not, we can table that and know what the cost is pending a successful November vote.
I have a question for Chief.
Please, Counselor.
Chief, based on your comments, I'm gathering that your recommendation to the legislature would be that they go back to the circuit courts for the drug charges rather than go to municipal courts?
I would say that my personal opinion is yes, that's where they had success. Again, I will say drug court, if you talk to Judge Collins that ran circuit court, drug court, they were wildly successful. And I say they were successful because that carrot out there is what people need a lot of the times. And so that would be, my preference and my recommendation would be to move it back into those, not only because municipal courts are not equipped unless you're a large court like Portland, like some of those larger courts, Beaverton might be considered a larger municipal court. The impacts at the local level, it is tough, where the counties have some resources that are already intact with through HHS, chemical dependency, et cetera.
Right, that makes a lot of sense to me, and it also seems to me that as you're lobbying on behalf of both the Chiefs Association and then thinking about your responsibilities with the city, that trying to like the legislature going back and kicking this back to 800 cities or something throughout the state would be a real big challenge, a much bigger challenge than just 36 county courts handling it like they did previously.
I mean, think of Carlton, think of Yamhill.
Exactly.
Think of these small rural communities that have little to no backbone to be able to support, even though the drug epidemic is as bad as in Burns that it is in Portland in some respect. It's just a ratio of where it sits. And to your point, that's why regional drug centers need to be included in any sort of funding package. And I'm going to get off my soapbox, or I'm actually on it, but I'm going to tell you, somebody needs to be jumping up and down at the state level saying build these things, because everything else that we're doing is for naught unless we have treatment.
That's right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Ask a question.
Please, Councilor Menke.
I'm just curious, because when we originally did this 110, supposedly there was funding for this. Is there funding out there that's just not being used for these regional centers that could be built?
I think if you read the state report on OHA's funding and management of the ballot measure 110 money, I think you would see, I would encourage you to read that, and it'll tell you a lot about, in my opinion.
It didn't get distributed.
Where am I going to find that?
I think, so Oregon Health Authority was who was tasked with distributing those funds for the creation of those regional treatment centers. And from my reading of it, that money has not been distributed. So those regional treatment centers have not been built.
It hadn't happened, but there was money there. Is that a yes, you think?
Yeah, there's money. It's just not getting.
Well, it sounds like, listening to the questions and stuff, I understand better now what you're asking for. Yeah, I think we should proceed.
Okay. Well, we're not making any voting decisions on this, but I generally hear from the council that everybody is supportive of moving this forward, and we support you, Chief. We support you as well. I don't want you to think that we're trying to drop something on you without adequate time for preparedness. So we look forward to working with both your departments going forward, working with the county as well as we move forward and figure out real solutions here. So thank you so much. Thanks for coming tonight. And, oh, Claudia.
I just wanted to state, Counselor Chenoweth also had comments on this item. I don't know if you want me to read them into the record or...
I think if you want to distribute them to counselors, I don't think he did, I don't remember his exact comments, but he was supportive of moving forward as well.
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you so much, and the meeting is adjourned at 8:44 PM.